Thank you so much for joining me today, Linda. Everyone, this is Linda Addison. She is fantastic for many, many reasons, but let me just list a few of them off. Let's get this part out of the way, okay? First African-American winner of the Bram Stoker Award. And now she's won it multiple times. Horror Writer Association's Lifetime Achievement Award winner. Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association Grand Master. That's a mouthful, and it's an amazing thing to say. Widely published poet, like over 300 poems to her credit, short story author, just amazing mentor. Like, how does all of that feel? These are truisms about you right now, this moment.
It feels very strange. It's like the resume, you know, I tell people my resume is very shiny, but you know, when I'm not looking at the resume, which is most of the time, by the way, I'm sitting here working on something that's challenging me to write. So
yeah. You have, I know you have one of those on your desk. Can we see one of those shinies? We just have to see it.
I can show and tell you two things. First of all, here is the Grand Master Award, which I always say is like a magic bubble. It's like, you had to see me trying to take a picture of this. It's amazing.
It's fantastic.
It's really, you know, and I never ever thought, I think Ray Bradbury, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the people that's a Grand Master. They've only made 8. I was like, okay,
right.
Okay.
Right. So amazing.
To me also, I am also
very cool. No, and that's the cool thing I like about you, because you're so humble about it. You are amazed. It's like, wow, look at this cool thing.
I mean, I don't know when it'll get to the day where I'll be like not amazed, but I'm not sure. But I haven't gotten there yet, so let's, you know, we'll see.
You're right.
He's kind of cool about it, but it's not always working for me. So here's the Bram Stoker, and inside the door, ooh, okay. Inside the door, it has the category, the name of the book, which is The Place of Broken Things. This is the latest one I won last year with Alessandro Menzetti, and my name in the year. And then it's like, it's a spooky house.
It's cool.
And it's heavy. You know, it's like a weapon. I don't even need a gun here in Arizona. I could just throw this at somebody and take care of my business. I'm just
exactly. So, and then people would say, what was the weapon that you used? Well, I don't even understand what this is. It'd be great.
I know. I try to take it around when I do talks too. I mean, when I used to be able to go in public, especially when I talk to children, because it's impressive and I like people to be able to hold it in their hands too. So I have 5 of those. They're called houses in the business. I have 5 houses. And then I have a 6th house, because the Lifetime Achievement was also a house, which I didn't know. I mean, there's a recording of me getting it. And when I turned around, they handed me another house. I was like, oh my God.
That is so neat. That is, and when you get the chance to look back and say, look at all these houses on my shelf, you know, I mean, you earn those. It's fantastic.
Well, I have one in every room to remind myself, especially when I'm struggling with writing. I'm like, okay, I've done this before. I can do this again.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
And I'm also very, very cognizant of the fact that there are so many good writers who don't have awards. So, you know, I'm not at all dazzled with being, I don't feel like, ooh, I'm the best in the whole wide world. No, this is good. I love my work also, but there's an awful lot of people who are doing good work who haven't had the opportunity. So, you know, I keep that in the back of my mind also.
Yeah, and that's probably where that lifetime achievement comes in, and just the mentorship that you do. You're the total package, you know, and that's not even what I was going to mention next, but we might as well, because it makes sense. It's a nice segue, because you have this wonderful spirit of mentorship, right? I mean, I like to tell the story to people when I can get them to sit and listen to me for a couple of minutes about how I, you know, wasn't writing for a while just because, you know, life. I mean, I came out in the early 2000s and lived life in between there and wasn't writing. But then here comes an email in my inbox from you, you know, with an anthology that would happen to be Sycorax's Daughters, you know, and asking me to send something in. And I remember just being like, I don't think she knows who she's not, I've gotten the email in error. I mean, I remember thinking she doesn't know who I am. And then we spoke, and yeah, you did. But please. it's amazing to, but you being on the other side of it. Because, I mean, there's a term in wrestling that's like a journeyman wrestler who's takes all the fights, but, he might be the guy who has to take the bump or doesn't win the fight that was scripted that way or whatever it is, just is constantly working, but not necessarily blowing up. And I felt for a long time that was like my role. I was constantly working, and you might know who I am, maybe. But it was interesting that my name had actually, or my work rather, had gotten to, ears like yours or eyes like yours. And you read so widely. It's the beautiful thing of it. And when you find, work that you want to, talk to someone about it, that you feel passionate about, where some other people don't do this, I hope you know that, you actually reach out.
I do. And I do it because I cannot speak for anyone else, but I do it because how I came to this moment in my life is by the same way, by people who I didn't think even knew I existed, saying they read something of mine, that it was great and that I was going to be great. And I'm like, what? My mama taught me when someone says something nice to say thank you, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, who are you talking to? And this is like, I'm talking about people like, Jack Ketchum, AKA Dallas Meyer, who is no longer with us, sadly. But when I was in New York, he had read my stuff somehow. And then he said that to me. He said, oh, you're going to be great. And I was standing there like, no one even knew me. I hadn't done anything except, publish here and there. So, I mean, there's a lot of people in the path of my life who have lifted me up, if in one conversation, several conversations in different ways. And I can't see any other way of doing it than to do the same thing. I mean, because I've said this to friends of mine. Yes, I have 5 houses. I have 6 if you count the lifetime achievement. After the first one, I was kind of like bedazzled. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? What's happening in the world, in the universe? But I also have a deep abiding belief in the energy of the universe, that we are not alone, that we're all connected. So I've taken it as these are gifts for me so that I can share the light with other people. And I'm delighted to, and you are doing so. I mean, from that day when you thought I was punking you, which by the way, I felt the same way when I got the email on lifetime achievement. I was like, what? I had to make sure that was right. Then when the SFPA said I won the Grandmaster, I did just had this moment like, is this the right one? Is this like some kind of like scam? But I mean, you're doing work out there, and it's wonderful to see.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Again, now you got me blushing. I can't even finish. Come on. We have like an hour left. No, I mean, it's just you're inspirational to a lot of people. I count myself lucky to consider you one of my friends, because since that moment we've been in communication. Well, I'm just telling you, and I know you feel the same way as me in terms of, getting it. It's like, okay, oh my gosh, my cheeks are hot, but still it's important. And now I've gotten on camera saying it. There. All right.
Learning to say yes. I have there's a author I've known for many, many years, who is also another one who's lifted and mentored me, Nancy Kress, who's an award-winning science fiction writer. And I told her last year when we were talking online, I told her how, whenever I do speak or do these interviews and stuff, I always think of her, because I remember like seeing her, or being in her workshop, or being at a convention, and she's there, and she's very, very even about, like saying thank you and not trying to deny when people give you a compliment. So, I think it's important. I teach my mentees that same thing. I'm like, good. I know you don't feel comfortable, but you're allowed to just smile and say thank you.
So let's dive into the work. You have commented in the past that you really love words. I think that any author who like really feels it, like they have to write as opposed to just wanting to, agrees with you wholeheartedly. Just words are the jam, if you will, right? And you definitely tell multifaceted stories with these words. I mean, and poetry. I mean, and your poetry tells a story as far as I'm concerned. It's all like painting a picture. These stories and poems resonate with people. They hit them to their core. Would you do us the favor of showing us a little bit of the short story work, because a lot of people may be very much familiar with your poetry, which we will, of course, touch on later, but your short story work is kind of what I wanted to see if you would read for us today.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So we talked about, I could read the opening to my story that's in the magnificent OMG
Yeah, look at that. That's amazing.
Black Panther, but that won't be a complete story. So if you want, I can either read the opening to that, or I can read a story however you want. What do you want? Do you want me to do that?
I want you to do that.
Okay.
If I get to vote on this, I want to hear that one.
It's all good. It's all good. And there's a story behind the story of me writing this last year when I was being so challenged. But I'm going to take the cover off so it doesn't make so much noise while I'm reading.
Okay. While you're flipping through, let me ask you, which one do you think you like more, writing short stories or poetry?
Well, it's a very different animal for me, right? So poetry, as I've described, is constantly going through me. When I'm talking and when I'm listening, when I'm watching, the only time, I can't even say it's not while I'm sleeping, because I have a pad next to my bed that has a pen in it. When you pull the pen out, a light comes on. And I wake up in the middle of the night and I'll scratch down some words. So poetry is very like a second voice for me. It's always there. And then fiction, up until 2017, was a little bit more work for me. You know, and then somehow in 2017, it started being the same way, meaning it would just come organically. And so that's been very nice, but poetry is still always my easiest second voice, but I'm enjoying very much having the same kind of energy with fiction, to be able to sit down and quiet my mind. I do meditation, I do Tai Chi, I love to burn candles that have a scent, and I'll just sit, and then I almost just hear what I'm writing. And I've always done that with poetry, but now it's happening with fiction, which I really enjoy that. So
that's neat. That's very neat.
Although I need a little bit more editing with fiction, because grammar, commas are my kryptonite, as I've said. It doesn't seem like I put enough of them in the story. So I have a writer's group that gives me feedback. Okay, so I'm going to read the beginning. Oh, the beginning of my story. Perfect. And all the stories in here, I think, are so amazing, so different, and so much fun, you know. And I remind people who don't know, this is not a graphic novel. There are no pictures in here. It's all stories, and it's the first anthology, which Jesse Holland was the editor and creator of the concept. So my story is called Shadow Dreams. Dira had never traveled so far from her village in her 14 years. Except in her dreams. But this was no dream. She was on a train to the capital of Wakanda. As excited as she was about training to become a Dora Milaje, Dira was very nervous. Everyone in the village was excited, especially her parents and sister. Dira was going to do everything she could to make them happy. More than anything, Dira wanted to make her grandmother happy and proud. It was her passing that made Dira 2 weeks late to begin her training. Her mother had tried to get Dira to leave sooner, but once it was clear her grandmother wasn't getting better, Dira wouldn't leave her side. The last words from her grandmother were, "Be the best you can for Wakanda." The train pulled into the main station where most of the passengers got off. Dira was waiting on the platform with one bag slung over her shoulder when a tall girl about Dira's age, dressed in a white tunic and pants with a red scarf, walked up. She had a short sword and a waist belt and looked strong. "Hello, you must be Shadera. I am Uto. Welcome to the Golden City." "Everyone calls me Dira. You are a trainee also?" Dira asked with a smile. "Yes. I hope you aren't disappointed that a full warrior woman didn't come to take you to the training facility." Uto stood with her hands on her hips. "They do have more important things to do." "Oh no," Dira shook her head. I didn't know we were allowed out as initiates." Uto laughed and patted Dira on the shoulder. "Well, it's not a jail. Although with all the training we do, a jail might be more relaxing." Dira wrinkled her brow. Don't worry, you'll be fine. Only the best are given a chance to train. Now, let's get you to your new home. Dira tried not to look like a tourist, but it was hard. There was so much to see, so many people wearing intricate, colorful patterns representing different tribes. The enticing aromas of spiced minced meat and vegetables sold by street vendors offering samples made her mouth water. The streets of the Golden City were crowded, but Dira stayed next to Uto as they walked to the training facility. People made space for them as they walked, out of respect, and because no one wanted to bump into the trainee warrior. The building of the training facility rose high into the sky. Before they stepped through the entrance, Uto faced Dira and put her hands on her shoulder. Your village is now Wakanda. You are from Wakanda. All villages. You understand? Dira looked into her eyes and nodded. Answer out loud. Yes, Dira said, taking a deep breath. When they walked through the entrance, Dira glanced to the right where the royal palace could be seen through the large lobby windows. May I ask a question? Of course. Dira nodded to the palace. I didn't realize we would be so close. How better to protect Wakanda? And the king, Dira asked. The king is Wakanda, but you know that, Uto said. Dira lowered her head. Yes, I'm sorry. Uto gently lifted Dira's head. We never bow our heads for anyone except the king, okay? Yes, Dira said. You must be tired from traveling, Uto said. What would you like to see first? Where you sleep or the training area? I want to see the training area, Dira said, brightening up. Uto smiled. This way. They took the elevator up 3 floors and walked down a long hallway until they were in the entrance of a large open room. Each of the corners were set up for a different kind of training, from hand-to-hand weaponry and martial arts. There was a rock climbing wall to the right and a running track around the edge of the room. Leave your bag here and pick a weapon. Uto pointed to the open shelves to their left. Dira stuffed her bag onto a shelf and selected a short blade from the wall before following Uto into the training room. All the trainees were dressed in white, like Uto. Dira felt out of place in the gold and green trimmed tunic and pants of her village. They approached a group sitting on the edge of a padded area, watching 2 young women spar with short blades while the teacher talked them through their moves. Dira and Uto stood nearby, and Dira could barely make out what the teacher was saying because she was talking so fast. In the end, one of the young girls used a wrist block to dominate the other, causing her to drop the blade. They sat down with the group without a word. The teacher motioned to Dira and Uto to come to the front of the class. She tapped Dira's blade. So, you are the new arrival? Yes. I can barely hear you. The teacher leaned down. Did you actually speak? Yes, Dira said louder. Several of the others sitting on the ground tapped each other's blades in support. The teacher walked around Dira, taking her in. What is your name? Shadira, but I am called Dira. And where are you from, Dira? Dira opened her mouth to say the name of her village, but instead said, Wakanda. Good. You have learned your first lesson. She nodded to Uto, who sat on the floor with the others. Let's see you disarm me. The teacher grabbed Dira's blade wrist, applied a nerve lock, and swept down with her own blade, stopping within an inch of Dira's neck. When Dira didn't move, she released her, causing Dira to stumble back and fall to the floor. I wasn't. Dira stopped talking, realizing what had just happened. The teacher leaned down, grabbed Dira's hand, and pulled her to her feet. You weren't ready? The Dora Milaje are always ready, Dira said. Yes, even in our sleep. The teacher pointed to one of the seated trainees with her blade. With every inhale and exhale, the student said, ready to defend, ready to die for Wakanda. The other trainees tapped their blades and shouted, for Wakanda. You aren't Dora Milaje yet, but that's why you're here, the teacher said. Show me the first form for knife disarming. She stood with her blade pointing at Dira, then closed her eyes. Dira went through the form she had been taught since she was 8 years old, as fast as she could, and bowed when she finished. Very pretty flow, very pretty flow. The teacher opened her eyes and smiled slightly. Dira's heart dropped. Your blade made a lot of flat noise. Listen. The teacher raised her blade and swiftly swung it in front of Dira's face, close to her nose, which is fine if you wish to slap your opponent. She swung her blade again. Dira couldn't see the difference in the angle, but she could hear it as it whistled through the air. What is that sound, Dira? The killing sound, Dira said, looking at the teacher in the eyes. Good, at least you know the difference. The teacher nodded to the seated trainees who stood. After dinner, we'll return here to begin blade training. The teacher, Dira, waited for the other trainees to leave. Somehow she lost sight of Uto. The teacher came up to her. Those are lovely clothes, but you need to change into trainee clothes. Did you go to the dorms before coming here? No, teacher. Dira walked with her to the exit area. My name is Okoya. Come, I'll show you. So that's the beginning of my story, Shadow Dreams, from Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda.
Wow. I could see all of it. It was so visual.
Thank you.
Excellent.
I like to write fiction like that. I've been, people have given me that feedback before, that my fiction tends to be visual, and I see it also in my head that way. So that's why I try to write it the same.
No, I mean, and it was action packed in this scene specifically. So you could really, I was waiting to see the difference in the blade, because I kind of had a feeling that she was going to do something that was more passive, as opposed to what they were looking for. And I found it to be just really engaging. It was moving. You moved with it, and you didn't feel like you were just sitting and reading, exposition, basically starting off. It was very, very engaging. So yeah, very nice. That's
Thank you.
Awesome.
It's the story basically follows. I mean, when we were giving ideas, when we were giving opportunities to do the stories for this anthology, Jesse had given us, some areas that we could write in, and it was all of the stories are written in the comic book canon, not the movie, which there is a difference. And I read all of the comic books that included the warrior women, because I knew. Anybody that knows me knows that's where I was going to go. There's stories in there about, Black Panther, about a lot of the main characters that we knew. But I also was curious about what it would be like to be 14, to show up, to be trained. And then, because I have a real obsession with quantum physics, have always, there's some stuff in there with multiple realities. Nice. Things go wrong.
Awesome.
And so it was a lot of fun to write. It was a challenge. One of the things that is true about my fiction and about my poetry is that I tell people that if I mention something in a poem or a story, most likely that is factual. I like to research these things. So when I decided for everything in here, I had to research a lot, because there's nothing in the comic books about how they're trained. So I had to basically create it myself. So I did a lot of watching short sword fights, getting the language right. There is, what I just read you is for real. There's a way of moving the blade when you're serious about killing someone, and there's a way of moving it where it just like kind of slaps them. Doesn't cut. And I believe
that research is important, and you clearly, I mean, the wrist block, from that, this terminology I've heard before, so I knew right then and there you've done research to try and make sure you had it right. So
Yeah, I don't like to take anything for granted, you know, and also I find that factual actually does feed my imagination. There's a scene in there with running track. I didn't
Mhm.
assume that I know what that's about, so I did some research on that. So, you know, I like, and hopefully I do it in a way that doesn't throw people out of the story. I think that's really important too. You know, I'm not writing an anthropology report. So,
Right, right, right. No, I think the details pull people in, you know, they make it becomes more grounding. They feel like there's a reality here, so that when you suggest to them that there's an alternate reality, they're more willing to go with you there because you've based so many pieces of the story on fact. So
no,
they are, you know, they know they're reading fiction, but they kind of feel like it's grounded. And that's
yeah.
interesting.
I think it's really important. And I mean, your writing does that too. And you do some wonderful work when you're writing characters also to pull people in. So, you know, it's really, it- there's a whole thing to writing in a way that won't let the reader go. Your
Mhm.
writing does that also, my dear.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, you know, it's funny you said that because my next point to you is that you've said before in our private conversations that you find that your work is psychological horror based as well. And mine totally is. I tried to switch a little and said, okay, I'm going to say I'm supernatural suspense, but I'm really married to psychological horror. I think that's just the fact of it. And when you do that with genre, though, it comes from a specific place and it's a preference because your writing tends to lean that way. It doesn't matter if you're writing a sci-fi piece or this piece you just talked about. You've added some elements that would easily put them into a cross genre space, if you will. Like, what do you like, any specific genre more, or is your, I would say that you like psychological horror more, but what do you actually think you would like more?
I that's ooh, no one's ever asked me that. That's a good one. And
Oh,
so
good.
therefore I've never answered it. So, so let me try. um For me, whether I'm writing fiction or poetry, as I said, it's often me sitting quietly and listening to what comes. And I have written a poem and then a story from the poem. I've written poems to stories that I've already written. So, you know, I'm more grabbed by, I mean, what often comes is a human character, not always, because a science fiction novel that I'm finishing up, there's a lot of non-human characters in there. But what is what is happening to that point of view character, and often what is interesting to me is that there's got to be some kind of a problem, right? There's got to be something they're tied up in, they want to get untied, they got to, or they want to tie up, I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right, right.
So I think that I'm very, very, very deeply curious about the psychological things that happen for people.
Mhm.
So, and then it comes through often in a dark way with horror. But I mean, I've done it with science fiction. I've done it with, in my book, How to Recognize the Demon Has Become Your Friend. I have stories in
Do
there
you mean
that
this one? On
yeah,
my desk.
good. Um, there's two stories in there about these cousins who their mothers are twins that I love them. And I'm very character oriented too. And so this one story is about them when they're young, and then the other story is about them when they're in their 20s. And so I get very caught by characters and the
Mhm,
psychological things that they're going through, which also reflects very much real life as
mhm,
far as I'm concerned. And I've done a lot of reading on psychology and everything that's going on. I'm just curious.
mhm.
Curious. And
Well, and I
then,
think that's what it comes through in your writing. You know, I mean, like I said before, I mean, I think if you can give a point for someone to grab onto that they can recognize in normal life. You know, if you describe a street and you know talk about the track houses that all look the same, everyone has seen that. You know, everyone knows that. And if you can describe it well enough, they might very well feel like you're talking about their street. And you're not, but they don't know that. It's always finding the connection. And I think that you do that through, you know, what you described in terms of the character, writing the characters, really fleshing them out, understanding what's going on in their mind. And I think that you just gave an example of that here because we truly felt that characters concern, worry, stress. What did I do with the blade? I don't even understand what she's talking about. Oh, I heard the difference. You know, it was kind of a, oh, it was all there. And you felt that, you know, I felt myself sort of tensing up, and I'm definitely not a 14-year-old being trained in Wakanda. So, you know.
Well, yeah, once I have the character, then I've got the story. You know, that's when the story goes for me. So, and what you said earlier, I mean, I don't want anybody to sleep on that because that's super important. When I was talking about adding facts and stuff, and you said, you know, when you start with basing it in facts, then you can extrapolate to something that's not true, but then people buy in because you've already grounded them in that. And that was also in some, I can't think of who it was. Another person said that too, another writer. And I think that's super important because, well, we can talk about what I'm working, the latest one that I'm working on, but a lot of things are like that to me. And my imagination, since I can first remember 4 years old, 3 years old, is always been, here's something real, then what would happen if it got unreal? That was always how my mind worked.
And that's why I say, I mean, I was waiting to hear your answer. And if it hadn't been psychological horror, I was going to go, are you serious though? I mean, I think it really is. I think it really is. And I think that a lot of that's like, if you think about the things we read in the 80s and some of the work from the 70s, Ira Levin, I mean, that was all psychological horror. I just keep thinking it's there and people are not realizing what they're reading. It's, you know, sort of this draw that's not, it's I don't want to call it uncategorizable, but it's just definitely straddles the line and people don't know exactly where it falls, but it's absolutely there.
And I feel the same way, like when you said earlier, you know, that, you know, some of your works, supernatural suspense, well, there's still psychological stuff going on there. I mean, as long as you, unless you have a machine, and the story's about a machine, and then I don't know how you can make that interesting to the reader if you didn't add some psychological stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I agree with you. Oh my goodness. Well, let's talk a little bit more about, because since I've held up my book now, I want to talk about Morning Meal.
Oh, wow.
That's a big one. So, you know, I bumped into it on the film screenplay circuit, which is like awesome.
I know.
You know?
I know seeing you out there.
It's so cool though. Like, I'm out there doing my thing and I'm like, wait a minute. Is that Morning Meal from Linda? Wait a minute. Tell me about that. I mean, it's such a moving poem. It's in this book, by the way, everybody, I keep holding it up. It's based on a poem of the same title out of that book, right? It's I don't want to give it too much. How did the project come to be?
Oh, wow. That is a story that I never knew was going to ever happen. It's like, did I ever dream I was going to be in a Marvel Black Panther book? No,
awesome.
That was not on my bucket list. Grandmaster and a whole lot of other things. So I met the filmmaker Jamal Hodge in New York some years ago. And he had read my work before we met, and he was very excited to meet me, to talk to me. Then we became friends. And he's an incredible writer too. Like, are you kidding me? You know, science fiction. And now he's writing poetry, and it's just like, ooh, so good. Anyway, so he had always said to me, I want to do a film based on one of your poems. And in my head, I was like, well, I probably said it out loud too, because I'm not much to hide things. I was like, how in the world? What are you talking about? Who makes a film out of a poem? I was like, okay. So, and I had read actually a couple of scripts of his from other poems that he was interested in, but Morning Meal is the one. And when I wanted to say morning meal for people listening, the word morning is morning loss, not good morning. Because I sometimes forget to say that. And so it sounds like morning meal, like breakfast. Right. Exactly. Right. It's not exactly that. And so he really was inspired, and he wrote a story around the poem, which is, you know, about the loss, a mother's way of processing it. And it takes like 2 minutes to read. If you wanted me to read it, I could do it too. But anyway, and it didn't come from a personal loss of mine, but from years ago, watching a news story about a child missing and then them finding the child dead. And to me, as a mother, I thought, this is an impossible. How do you even begin to process such a thing?
Right.
Well, that's what the poem came from. in the poem, and there's nothing to give away. I mean, anybody can read the poem. I read it all the time, but in events. But what came to me when I sit quietly and listen, and like I said, that's how I write, listening, and it comes out, is this idea of this mother just eating her way through the trail of her son's life.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, and that's just what I saw. And so when I wrote the poem, and I do edit my poems, some more than others, that one I did not edit very much.
Wow.
And so he wrote the screenplay around that, but he built in so many wonderful levels. And then the actress who played the mother, Ruya Corman, if I'm not saying that right, I'm sorry, Ruya. Everyone in it, the actors who play the children. I have said this before it came out when I first saw it, that every single shot in there is beautiful. And it's
Mm-hmm.
a short film right now, but he's working on a full movie script.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, yeah, you would think that. Well, it's gone on to win a lot of awards for
Yeah.
him and for the actors. So I guess it's not just me.
No, 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 no. You said
So,
you'd read it, so of course I am happy to have you do
well, I only
that.
offered it since it's short. And so make people have to listen to too much too long. But
They won't worry. They won't mind this. This is really good. I'm excited that you're gonna read it.
so I mean, the thing is that it's the idea that it was made into a film was mind-blowing for me.
Yeah.
The fact that this is my first, and as I say, not my last, if my intention has anything to do with it, and I'm pretty good using my intention. Last, but I'm so delighted, blessed on every level that Jamal's made such an incredible film out of this poem. So the poem is called Morning Meal.
Okay.
She was so hungry, raw nothingness growing at her center. Eating began with simple things, a kindergarten drawing, the yellow construction paper crunchy, the plastic badge from swimming class chewy at first, its silver foil edge caught in her teeth. The handmade Mother's Day card smelled sweet. Its crayon words tasted bitter. One toy spaceman bitten into little pieces, swallowed like strange pills. She ate her way through his trail piece by sheet, but still the hunger scratched inside. Each memory lingered like the sweet herbs she used in his favorite meal. Soup she would never make again, like his face she would never see again. So that's Morning Meal. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
and
It's
then
just whew.
and it's people have always reacted very strongly to it when I've read it. So I am beyond words on how delighted I am about the film, that him and the production staff and all of them are getting so much feedback awards from the film that he made by that poem. So it's very special. It's a very
Mhm.
special thing.
Well, I want to just make clear they heard it, and I'm so glad they did. I'm glad you offered to read it because you can't build. It's the one thing to adapt a work, and do something with it and get somewhere, but you have to think about what the original work brought to the table. He could not have made whatever he ended up making as the final product without the power of that original work. So
Yeah.
please
Thank
don't discount that. And I know anyone who just heard that is stunned by it. But it's not just the words you used or the feeling behind it. It's your reading style. I want to show because I was drawn in. I'm pulled into the screen like I want to show a video of Mama Wata. Mommy
About
Wata.
that poem, Mommy Wata.
It's just good. Let me just get my screen open so that I can share it and we can watch that together. Because it's not, like I said, it's not just this.
Well, let me give it a couple sentences background on this.
Okay. Please do.
Mami Wata is an African goddess, for real, who was known for coming to sailors in their sleep and giving them maps, star maps, so that they can navigate. And a lot of times the ships out of Africa looked like they had a mermaid on the front carved, but it wasn't. It was Mami Wata. So that's a thing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I
that's
had
why
the water goddess part down, but I didn't know that other part you just mentioned. Oh, interesting. Okay, ready? Can you see the screen?
I can.
Okay, let's go. Can you hear it?
I'm not hearing or seeing anything.
Worry sings bright in your neurons.
Do you hear that?
Your light so blurred, I could barely taste you while I was sleeping, dreaming of the time before. I melted down 2 galaxies making my way here. Why you
What
wait
happened?
so long to call for me, baby? Your pain is clean and clear in the thickening tattoos on your back. You no longer hunger for us in your dreams. Silence has softened your soul, eaten at your aspect. You rest in my arms now. It's gonna be all right. I used to visit the voodoo pantheons when you gyrated in dusty courtyards. Back when you came to us open and free in your sleep. Mama Vishnu and I introduced star maps to the faithful. Crowded your dreams with luminancy. Brought your children to my lap, just like you now. Let them look through my eyes into the darkness to see nothing is empty. Lean their heads against my belly so they could hear the purr of the never born. What took you from us is the hard things you build, so you can forget the soft things. But hunger for a way to live without bruised, outstretched hands don't just go away, because you fill the night with bright lights, making the moon and stars blush with neglect. You're always hungry for things to fill your hands and pockets, shiny, unneeded things. I stayed with you, because with all that wanting, you made an opening for me. Couldn't resist your eyes, rolled wide upward and inward to me. You know how vain we can be. It's vanity hurting you now, baby. There's always a way to heal. You got to know where to look. It's the sharp edges behind your closed eyes. I savored the small wounds unhealed in your heart, even when my name lay dead in your mouth.
See, that's. Can you hear me now? That is amazing, Linda.
Thank you. I mean, you know what? When actors get up and they get those big awards and they're like all the good stuff to God, I'm just saying, I just sit and listen. When I wrote that, like I said, I have the yellow piece of paper I'm sending, or we'll talk about where that's getting sent to. But,
yes.
When I sit down, I've been journaling since 1969, writing down everything that comes to me, through me. That poem came through me after reading about Mami Wata, because again, I'm often inspired by actual factual things. And when that poem came, it's still a blessing to me. I mean, you know what, I tell people this, but it's really quite true. When I write something and I'm sort of like just listening and writing, and then I sit back and read it, and then I'm like, ooh. And then I'm like, ooh, there's nobody else in the room. I guess I'm putting my name on it, you know. And it truly is how it feels to me. You know, I mean, I don't feel dissociated completely, but I don't ever have this moment where I'm like, I made that up out of somewhere, nowhere. No.
Wow.
It
wow. I mean, it's so well crafted. The way you performed it is beautiful, because your voice was sort of like haunting. it permeated. I loved what, there was a slight accent that I still can't quite place exactly what you were doing with that, but something, and then whoever shot this thing, man, it was fantastic.
Thank
I
you.
mean, you know, because you can listen to spoken word, especially if you've ever gone to like a poetry slam. There's always this fast-paced cadence, like people are like yelling it at you or singing it at you or spitting it at you sometimes, right? But this was like smooth. The vibe was totally different. And I don't know, it really, it just hits differently. It felt like truth. And I don't know, like even as saying that, having listened to it several times, I can't even really define what I mean by that. It
I know
just,
what you mean, because when I hear it, I feel like I'm watching someone else do
okay.
something that I love. The thing is that, and I say this to people when I do Mami Wada, that poem came with that accent.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Love that. In fact, excuse me, when I read, I don't necessarily decide how it's going to be. And I did learn how to do this. I didn't always read so well. But that particular poem, the first time I read it out loud, and that's how I usually edit my poetry, is I read it out loud.
Oh, okay.
And when I read it, it came with that voice. And I was like, okay.
Guess that's what we're doing.
And so I taught workshops on reading. I'm actually going to do a one on not Courthouse. What is that app called? I feel crazy now. I'm having a crazy moment.
You just have a lot going on.
Clubhouse.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm doing a quick version of my workshop on Clubhouse. Jesse has Jesse Holland, who's the editor of Black Panther and a whole lot of other things, has a Clubhouse every Saturday at 6 p.m. where people can go on and read. It's called Writers Read or something like that. I'm sorry that I don't know it off the top of my head. Anyway, I did last week, and then I told him about the workshop, so he asked me to come back and just talk 10 minutes about it. So when I first started reading, how I read is I would do this as fast as I could and run off the stage away because I was scared, I was nervous, I got nauseated. Then I heard, listen to people read who I loved their work. Alice Walker, Maya Angelou, Eudora Welty, who's a Southern author. And I thought, I want to read my work like that. I want people to be like in it, and not just like, oh my God, this girl's going to throw up. You know what I'm saying? So I took two classes that changed everything for me. One is with a poet, Veronica Golas, who I'm teaching at the Taos workshop sometime in July. Sorry, I got a lot. You're right, I got a lot. But I took a workshop with her. After listening to her read, I went up afterwards and said, do you teach? And then Dallas, who, when Dallas was here, and it still hurts me to even think of that in those terms, he was a master storyteller. I mean, it was like a movie, you know? And I went and I took one class with Dallas and it changed everything.
Wow.
He had me do a whole lot of things. So the workshop I teach is these points, but one of the things he had me do was go out in the hallway and read to him to learn to project myself. And then, so, the most important thing to me now is that every word is like a meal. It's like a fine piece of art. And so when I write, I want to be able to share that with people who are listening. So that's how I've learned to read well. I had good teachers and I try to teach it. I came back and I taught everybody I knew in my writer's workshop, which has been together since 1990, and everyone got something out of it and changed their thing. So
that's really, really cool. Because it's just so engaging. So yeah, thank you for that. Do you have, and this might be a really hard question, do you have a favorite poem?
Of mine?
Of yours.
Who? Gonna make all my children cry. All 310 of them. All 310 of my children gonna be crying. This is how I usually answer that question. It's usually the last one I wrote, or when people say like your favorite book, because I have a few collections, it's the last book I wrote. I will tell you right now, I'm obsessed because you know how I feel about Mommy Wada and all that stuff. But I am currently obsessed with a poem that's in my latest collection. Ooh, let me get this right. The Place of Broken Things that I wrote with Alessandro Manzetti. It's like 33 poems. There's a poem in here that I love to read called The Yellow House that was inspired by Van Gogh. And we both we wrote this. This was a collab poem, and I really enjoy that one. I didn't love all the poems in the book, though. I do love them all, but if I had to pick a latest one, maybe. I mean, there's some others in there that I love too, but that's the one I really, really, really enjoy reading.
Yeah, that's like almost an unfair question. I know.
It really is.
You answered it better than I've ever answered that, so good for you.
To pinch you next time I see you in person. Next year, maybe.
Next year, right? I was just about to say the same thing. Oh my goodness. So let me ask you this. You've got some major things going on, as we all just witnessed, because she rattled off a whole bunch of dates. But something really cool is happening. You touched upon it just a little bit when you said something about a little sliver of yellow paper. Can you tell us about what's going on?
Sure. So I think 10 days ago, the week before last, I did a event where Pitt University had several, had like 3 things. Michelle Lane is going to be doing one with, oh man, somebody so amazing. But anyway, so I did an interview with them, but I knew they were going to, and they made a big announcement, which I knew they were going to make because we had been in talks for a while. So Pitt University Library will be archiving my papers.
So awesome.
Which is like another one of those things I didn't necessarily have on my bucket list. So it's like,
but like when it comes to bear, you're like, whoa.
I was literally, I said this in the interview, but the gentlemen that were interviewing me, and then they also had another gentleman from the university's African American Poetics Society. They have a group there, and he was also there interviewing me. So he wasn't in the talks when we were talking about this archiving thing. But when we first started, I was literally giddy. Like, who gets giddy? That sounds like something that a 8-year-old gets. I was like, what?
That's awesome. That's so awesome.
You know, as we worked out everything, because I think a lot of people think of archives as something that happens when people pass.
Yeah.
A living archive is like a really kind of thing, you know. I mean, if I told you I had 200 books here of journals of things I've been writing stuff in since 1969, I probably got 300. Those I will not be giving them right away because I still use those to pull out information to inspire. But I had bins of papers. And like I said, I found when I started pulling out stuff to send them, I found 2 sheets of yellow lined paper with handwritten things. And it was the original Mommy Wada poem. I didn't even know I had it.
That's awesome.
All marked up. So, you know, the idea is for, I guess, scholars and teachers to be able to look at the things that I send them for the archive and map out, you know, and use an example how you go from an idea to a finished Mommy Wada poem, which is, again, that's one of the ones that when I performed it, people really got into it. And then that filming was done here in Tucson by a production company who I made contact with, and they'd seen me read and they were like, oh.
Yeah.
So the location, the filming, it was all them, and they did a beautiful job with it. So yeah, having my stuff archived.
What? Fantastic. I mean, that's just so cool. You know what I mean? It's like,
I do.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad that it's like amazing to me to watch this happening, you know, to you. And I'm just so happy for you. And it's like, if you know her, and you're getting a good sense of it now, but if you know her, like, it couldn't have happened to a nicer person. She is so deserving of all this. It's fantastic. It's not get emotional at the end of this thing.
It's pretty amazing to me too. So
I bet.
used to say all my house is full of piles of papers right now because I'm trying to put them all into a box by book,
Mhm.
not just send it all to them, which they're used to also, but trying to put like all of, how to recognize a demon in a box, all that stuff. So it's pretty breathtaking, humbling. I don't know. It's a lot. A
It's
lot
all
of
of those things plus.
it's a lot of good is what it is. I don't mean it like a
Exactly right.
complaint. It ain't complaining about it, but
Oh my goodness, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I do want to ask, I think maybe just, well, two more questions, three more questions. Do you care?
not at
We can
all.
do this. We
You
can
know, I
do
love talking to you, darling.
this. We can do it on film or after. Either way, this conversation is going to continue. Let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the state of horror fiction right now, right, at the stories that writers are putting out and material that, you're seeing today, what changes do you see in the landscape from when you were starting and now? Like, take a look back, right? And think about what it was like when you started out compared to what you're seeing today and what also you might foresee for the future.
Well, I mean, there's so many changes, right? So as I said, I've been in 50 anthologies.
Mhm.
Okay. I've been to, I don't know how many, probably 40 conventions or more in the time that I've been around so far. In 40 years of writing, I used to go to conventions and then it was more science fiction. I didn't really get into horror until I got out of college. And that was a psychological situation. I needed to feel safe in my life because for me, when I write about something fearful, I'm feeling it. And I
Mhm.
wasn't really ready to feel it until I got out of college. But in any case, um, in the beginning, 40 years ago, I would go to a convention. If I saw one brown face, it was a hallelujah moment. Okay. So that's now I can go to conventions and, depending on what's you're going to see a lot. I
Mhm.
mean, that World Horror was in Atlanta a few years ago, and oh man, so many brown faces. It was awesome. So, and then with the Professor Kenitra Brooks is the one who came up with the idea of Sycorax's daughters. She approached me because she had been studying the impact of African American and African American women on horror. That was a thing that she was interested in. Her and I had discussions. Then she was like, what about an anthology? I was like, oh, yes. Because you know who was tired of being the only Black person with a Bram Stoker?
Mhm. Mhm.
This
Yep.
girl. I
Yep.
mean, I ain't giving it away. I love having them, but really, I got to sit in that room by myself and drink. It's not a good look.
Right.
After a couple of bottles, it's nasty. I'm just saying. So I was like, I need company in the room to drink with.
Oh
So,
goodness.
and that's how we found people. I've often said that for Blacks writing horror, because our daily life is horror psychologically, right? You could go
Mhm.
out to get a soda and die for no
Mhm.
reason. So when we went looking for people, we found you and other writers in anthologies, magazines, places that you wouldn't necessarily think to look for. So what has changed is that right as of this moment, there's a lot more brown people with Stokers. I love that. I
Mhm.
love seeing so many members of the Horror Writers Association because you know what, if you want to change something, for me, you got to get in there. You can change from the outside too, but you know, pick your choices. I've been in the Horror Writers Association for quite a while, and I'm a trustee on the board because I'm
Mhm.
trying to make the change happen. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, and it's been happening. So, what's different is there's a lot more on a Black side, Blacks involved, writing, publishing, um, the stuff you're doing in films, the stuff Jamal's doing in films, in the genre world. Right now, wow, that gentleman who did Dominion, the anthology from Africa.
Oh, I know. Can see that cover. It's beautiful. I
Yeah,
can't
and
name him, but I can see the cover.
I'm going to ask him to forgive me because even if I could, I would mess it up. But the Dominion, and he also was one of the people that won the grant that the Horror Writers Association, the diversity grant. He was one of
Oh, are
the.
you speaking of Donald? I think so. He's either in Dominion and he won the grant, or I think he's in Dominion and he won the grant.
Okay, I'm gonna go look it up, but let me keep talking while I'm looking up.
Yes.
So the thing is that, so there, it's not just Blacks in genre that are coming up. It's like the world is starting to come in. And that's a really important thing for me because I've always felt very, very struck with and curious again about the world. I did a vampire story, and the vampire was an African woman. The vampire hunter is Chinese. I'm just curious about the world. And so to have, when I got into writing, to have it look so not that way.
Yeah. Yep.
And even what I read, I read all the science fiction, and it was not even a lot of women then, 40 years ago. So a lot of it has changed and expanded in that way. Where we're going, I hope, is more of that, more of the world coming into play, to see so many, to look at what's on the final ballot or even the reading list for the Stokers now, which is all the stories, poems, and then, we've expanded to include nonfiction. As you know, I mean, that's part of being, I'm very happy to be on a board of trustees where we're always trying to be more in how many more writing things can we include, types of writing and levels of writing. So I'd like to see more of that, we're not even close to what I would consider even, like, oh, we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Right.
But there's more of it that's happening. I mean, Nicole's anthology, Slay, Nicole
Yes.
Kurtz. I mean, yeah, because there is no new story, but there are new ways to tell the story. And so everyone's going to have some slant on it. I have tales from Japan, like I said, Africa, Ireland. I love to see what other cultures slant on telling stories are, because it inspires me, and I'd like to see more of it. And then I think there's two other things I wanted to mention that I think are really important. One is that there are now Black publishers in genre, right? Milton Davis with MV Media, who's been publishing and created steampunk, right? Because everyone knows steampunk.
Right.
Who's going to create steampunk if not a Black publisher, Black writers?
True. Yep.
That was going to come out of nowhere else. And so these new things that are coming out, even if they look like old, but they're new because of the storytellers, the voices, the culture, the point of view. I like to see more of that. But like I said, now that there are people who are Black publishers are putting things out, the self-publishing thing always happened, but there's more Blacks doing it, and then the other thing I wanted to point out is that there's a lot of white Black writers in the genre on high levels who are calling out other publishers if they put out here's my table of contents and they're all white men. No, and so that's how things change. We need to all be working together. As we know, Black Lives Matter doesn't mean a thing if we don't have people in America's culture who are not just Black backing it. We need the whole society to say this is not right.
Right.
So, that's where I hope to see things go. And then on the idea of Black Lives Matter and racism, I've said this before, when is it going to become a country where it doesn't matter what your skin color is or other things that people use, where you were born and then you came here? I think we probably got 10 generations that got to move on and regenerate before,
oh my God,
before we can, because people are taught that children are not born racist or small-minded. Children are born curious.
Right.
And they're taught to, this is different, be afraid. Let's put that down because that's going to make you seem smarter, stronger. So it's going to take a few generations, but there's a lot of awakening that's happening, and that's good. But it's still a problem, writing wise and life wise.
Yes. And I mean, the writing piece of it, the horror world, the community has been very welcoming from my perspective. But it's not been but I've heard stories, right?
I
And I believe the stories. I know that these
do.
people who are telling me are not telling me something false.
That's
And we in the horror community have been lucky because the science fiction side, the fantasy side, oh my, the romance side, oh my goodness. I mean, it's just, and that's not to disparage any groups, but it's just been, if you're looking at groups of people who write certain things, our community is kind of like come as you are, and we have our own challenges, no doubt, right? But come as you are. We all write the same kind of thing. So it's the acceptance level is different.
we don't have organized groups in horror that are trying to get rid of people who look different,
Right.
whereas others do. And when that happened, especially some years ago, when that happened in science fiction, and like I said, I started off reading and writing science fiction. I was like, yeah, the future, okay. And it's, as you said, it's not everyone, but you know what, the people, minorities in horror who have had problems, like you said, I believe it. You know why I believe it? Because people are people.
Right.
And
Exactly.
the only reason maybe, I feel like the only reason to some degree I haven't is because, if you're gonna come to my face and have a problem with the fact that my skin is brown, I have nothing but energy that I put out that says you can leave the room. Because
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care
Yeah.
about the problem. All I care about is humans. I love humans. I love to talk to humans, but I don't love to talk to somebody who thinks I'm less than them. No.
Right. And this conversation doesn't need to go there. That's not what we're here
It
for.
won't go there. That's what I'm saying. It's not going to go there with me. You're
Right.
going to find somebody else to talk to. Because you know what I'm going to, besides giving you that look that says, why are you still breathing?
Right.
I'm going to be like, I'm going to go over here, and I make this joke all the time. I'm going to go over here and get a glass of wine. I'll be right back. And you know who doesn't mind being rude and not coming right back?
Oh, sure. Of course. But
So
no one has time for that.
I've never had to pull the trigger on that, but I'm always ready. You just got
No, I definitely can say that I have not bumped into that myself. And I'm really thankful for that. I just don't, because I'm doing what I want to do and what I love to do and what I have to do. I have to write this stuff. To feel that I wasn't being accepted in the group of my peers who feel the same way as I do would be just devastating. So my heart goes out to the folks who.
Not even that long ago. I mean, I don't even know if it was a month ago when two Black writers who we know very well were doing a reading online.
Yes.
And they got like flash, attacked.
Yeah.
To the point where it was like 100 people or more, saying the worst kinds of things you can imagine, just broke in. I mean, it's still out there.
It's terrible.
And they did not deserve that. I was there. I was there because I knew they were doing their reading. They were guests and they had an open mic. I was like, if nobody don't come to the open mic, who's always ready to read.
Right, exactly.
And to witness that, I wasn't even surprised. I was more angry and saddened for them.
It's a shame. It's a shame. We're just, we've got a long way to go, I think, as people, just to get over the hump of this.
That's why I said 10 generations. People need to reincarnate and come back as full-fledged humans. And those who did that were not full humans. Not fully evolved. Not yet.
Yeah. I do remember that. Well, let me ask you this. So aspiring writers always want to hear, advice. They always do, right? And I think that, I don't know, all of our advice is different, right? We all kind of approach our writing from different angles and from different perspectives. So what would you tell someone who was asking you for this advice? Could be about navigating, like how to write, or it could be about navigating the industry, or anything. What do you think is most important to share to someone who's brand new? Because people are always interested, and if you're going to listen to someone, you listen to someone that you admire, and you're definitely one of those people. So what would you say?
First of all, thank you. I'll tell you this, and then I'll tell you what I say, because when I mentor people, this is where we start to have a conversation. When I was somewhere in high school is when I started thinking, oh my gosh, I want to see myself in print. And I started reading the lives of writers, like you said, to hear what writers who have, done the work, you know, I had a subscription to The Writer magazine and Writer's Digest. And I read a lot, so I picked up a lot. And I also got a lot from my mentors. Here's my conversation, a really important part of the conversation, and there's many points to it, but it starts with that I want to help that person. And so I would say to anyone who wants to create, and I think this is not just writing, it's painting, it's sculpting, it's film writing, whatever. What is the most authentic part of you that you create from? Find that. So my suggestion for writers is to sit down and write on paper, on the phone, on the computer, whatever your way of getting it out of you, to sit there and go into all those parts, you know, that psychological depth, the shadows, you know, whether, and if it's science fiction, then it's not the shadows, it's something else. But whatever it is, it's got to come from the deepest part of you, and you've got to dig sometime and find that. And so when I work with people one-on-one, I tell them, I don't want to read what you write. So don't feel pressured that you got to write it for me. You don't have to let anybody read it. You can read it, write it, delete it, burn it, whatever. But you've got that authentic point inside of you, that thing that drives you for your joys and drives you to tears. That is the part that when you create from that is going to make you different. It's going to make people pay attention. It's going to get attention, because that's all I've tried to do. Is write as honestly as I can. And I've been through therapy a couple times for some years, and that's not even the beginning of it. Years ago, when I was in high school, I used to read psychology books because I was trying to understand how I felt this way, why I saw people do things that I thought, why are you doing that? That's a terrible thing to do. So to understand that in yourself is going to be where you create from. I suspect you know that already. And then to, you know, for a lot of writers, then there's a fear of rejection. And, you know, when I'm working with people, I'll be like, okay, so you got to finish it first, start and finish, and then you got to rewrite, got to edit. Please get it together. Let's do this. You know, figure out what your weaknesses are. I don't redline people. That's not my job. Some people do that better. I will point out things and say, add that to your checklist when you're rewriting. So you go back through and you make it as clean as you can. And then send it out and start working on something new. And send it to the top markets first. Because you know what? 30 years ago, whatever, I always thought, I can get rejected from the New Yorker as fast as I can from Hoboken, you know, Wisconsin's corn newsletter. So I might as well start at the New Yorker. So, you know, send your stuff to the top markets first.
Sure.
You know, and if you're afraid, because I've been told that, but I'm afraid. I was like, that's okay, because I'm not a therapist. I'm a writer. So I can't help you with your fear. But what I can tell you is that fear is a feeling and actions is what you do. So you can be afraid and still send it out. You know, so I mean, I think those are kind of like the high points. I think that if people do this, and the other thing is, because I actually challenged people to do this, they did it and it worked, is if people say they don't have time to write, and I say, okay, do you have 5 minutes a day? Because I believe a lot of writing comes from the subconscious or superconscious, depending on how you look at it. And I think maybe that's part of my listening and writing. So if you say, I'm going to write from 5 to 5:10 every day, at some point your subconscious is like, oh, that's my window. When that window opens, I can push stuff out. And even if you only add one new word a day to the piece you're working on, by the end of the year, you're going to have something. And then, so I've challenged people, do that. Can you write for 15 minutes? Then when you finish, can you rewrite? Then can you send it out to the top? And people are like, yeah. And I've had people come back to me and say, you know, I did that, I got published. I was like, there you go.
That's exactly right. I mean, those are the things that I think that, you know, we all need to hear at some point in our lives. Of course you're going to be afraid. Of course you are. You know, but you have to get over it. If you want to see yourself in print, someone has to read it. So exactly. You have to get over it. And I think that and it's interesting that, you know, at a certain level, at a certain point, this is just the feedback that is provided. These are the basics, because there's a whole umbrella load of lists that you could, a laundry load of stuff that you could give someone, a list that you give someone to go ahead and think about. But when it comes down to it, it's exactly the stuff you just said. Those are the most important parts. So I appreciate that you reiterated that. I think people need to hear it.
Yeah, and they're not new to me. They're just the things I picked up as I read what other writers were doing. They're the things that I learned. At some point, once I started trusting my subconscious, trusting that if I'm still, stuff will come, trusting that if I write down everything that comes to me, then go back, I'm going to find some jewels in the heap. That I got to a point where I personally, for me, don't believe in blocks. I don't ever feel blocked. Now, I can't say other people don't. I mean, I certainly had periods of time where I didn't write. You know, when my mother, who has passed, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and me and all of my brothers and sister had to figure out how to do that. And it broke me down for a good period of time. You know, losses of all kinds of things like that stopped me in my track. That wasn't me being blocked, that was life. And when I finally was able to breathe again and write again, I wrote. So for me, nothing is a block. I'm not saying everything I write is a jewel, but it's always flow.
It's interesting that you mentioned it that way, because I thought, and I still don't know what I would term it. I think it is all terminology, really. I had that block for a long time because, you know, I had a life break. Let's call it that. I don't know. No, let's not call it that. That sounds like something else. No, I started a family, took time away, and I write psychological horror. So the way that I write, you know, my characters will manifest themselves. And I kind of, like you said, the stories come to you and you write them down. I just watch what they're doing. I'm like, really? Do that again. Let me record that, you know? But for me, you know, the monsters were standing near my infant because I wasn't writing fast enough. And it's all psychological for me, but so they're waiting for me, but they were too close. So I couldn't actually write the things I like to write. That doesn't mean I didn't write. I think that that's the one thing I have not mentioned a whole lot of. Instead of writing psychological horror, I started writing, you know, for the local newspaper. So I was writing gardening articles, which is really funny because I don't have a green thumb. So it's like, what was I doing? But, you know, I did that. I wrote these parenting articles, and I mean, I'm telling you, 400, 500 articles, you know, so I was prolific, but just not writing the things I wanted. And then, like you said, once the moment freed up, I was able to come right back and write the things I wanted to write. So there wasn't really block, but it was blocked from the things I loved. So I was doing something else because I knew somewhere inside myself, I said, you know, you have to write something, you know, and I'm not much for journaling. I don't journal. So I had to write something. And it was gardening articles. I'm telling you now. Literally, I know how to take care of your grass, somebody else's grass, because I still can't do my own. I'm still bad, but I can tell you the things that you're supposed to do. So you know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally do. I totally do. I mean, like I said, I've had long periods of time where I wasn't creating anything and publishing and sending stuff out, but I was still, journals had become a place for me. Maybe because I was very internal growing up. I was a very shy, quiet child, didn't talk to people outside the house. And so once I started writing my thoughts and feelings down, I never stopped. You know, I do believe that the creation, I mean, you know, I've learned in my own life that when I'm not writing, it's like it's building in some place other than consciously, however you want to call that. And so I've learned to trust that now. I really do. I know that Gerard Huiner had said to me, he's a writer in horror, amazing writer, had said to me more than once, you know, you have a deadline for a poem, Linda, and you don't write it until the day that it's due, but you always know that's when you're going to do it. Well, you know, the thing is, that's because I know that my subconscious is working on that poem. And so when did I read about Mami Wata, the African goddess? Who knows? Weeks, days, months before I wrote the poem. But in some place that it went in, and then when it came out, it's like, man, like I said, some of them, when they come, I'm like, holy mackerel, I don't know who wrote this, but ain't nobody here but me. So.
So speaking of writing, what is next? I promise this will be our last question. What is next?
Like I said, I like to talk. Well, I'm trying as quickly as I can to do a final edit writing on a science fiction novel that I finished at the beginning of last year.
Hmm.
And then I got sidewayed halfway through the year with not feeling well
Mm-hmm.
and my and brain fog and stuff like that. So I couldn't do anything once I finished it, and I got feedback from the writers group. So now I'm doing a fast rewrite. So it's science fiction, it's hard sci-fi, because like I said, I'm obsessed, always have been, with quantum physics.
Mm-hmm.
Was when it wasn't even like looked at as real science in
Yeah.
the 70s. They didn't think of it as real science in the 70s. So it's I'm having a lot of fun with it. And so I'm just kind of trying to get through this last rewrite so I can then start sending it out and talk to agents and publishers. So that's pretty exciting. I'm really excited about that. And then I have stuff coming out this year, but you know, you can go to my site to see things, what other panels I'm going to be on, because you know the writing world, as you know, has gotten into the Zoom situation. So there's like a panel a day if you wanted to go, you know.
Fully
So
embrace this thing, haven't we?
and then Black Panther has really created a lot of events because you know, Jesse Holland and other people who are pushing the, you know, the book to lift it up for all of us authors are setting up things. So if you my site is Linda Addison Poet, all together, one word, .com, because there's LindaAddison.com and she's a lawyer.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like this. But apparently I can't wait to meet her one day. We need pictures together because she does a lot of things. Like around when I got Lifetime Achievement, she did too. And I was like,
Oh my goodness. Wow.
maybe it's an alternate reality situation.
Right?
But in this sci-fi book, it's I'm playing again with my latest obsession of multiple realities. Alternate universes. So there's these portals that are opening up all around Earth, and all these different beings are coming through. And my question when I start writing this was, what is the effect on humans?
Uh-huh.
All of our fears and joys and wants and so forth. How are we reacting to these different things in different environments? You know, prison, working class, all these different kinds of situations. So it's I'm enjoying it, which is always where I go. That's the other thing I tell people, young writers, is love your work. I mean, if you don't love your work, then how are you going to send it to somebody and expect them to like to buy it? You don't have to love it out loud if you feel like that's an egotistical thing. I'm not having that problem, by the way. I'm
Right,
fine
right.
saying I love my work.
Right.
So I love this book. I'm very curious to see how the world reacts because people don't know me as a novelist.
Mm-hmm.
Then after this, I have a trilogy, which is also sci-fi. It's
Cool.
YA because the character starts off as 14.
Okay.
Or something like that. And I wrote 1.5 of those books, and then people call it getting stuck. When something's not ready, it's not ready.
Right.
And I got 1.5 books in, and then it started to become hard and painful. And I thought, ooh, that's not how this is supposed to be. So I stopped.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I'm ready to go back to that trilogy, and then we'll see. I'd like to do a novel on my African vampire and the Chinese vampire hunter. I'm really obsessed with them.
That's awesome. I'm excited that you're diving into novels. I really am. I mean, all that description and the feeling that you bring to your short stories and the poetry as well. I can't even imagine having that same pace with a novel. I can't wait for this. I think it's great.
It'll be fun. Those two cousins in How to Recognize the Demon, their 2 stories, they're waiting in line because all my characters do that. They'll slap me awake in the morning to tell me they want to do something. So I'm like, okay, I can only do 1 at a time or maybe 2, okay?
Isn't it hilarious? They just stand there for me. And I'm like, okay, I saw you.
I know, right?
You know, we'll get there.
So anyway, we'll see how this goes. I got a long list of novels that I want to do. So we'll see how this works out.
It's just more for us to read. Linda, thank you so much. Really, thank you. You really provided some gems here for people who are, trying to learn, and people who are old folks in the business. We've been doing it forever and ever. Got so much stuff to give, and I really appreciate you taking time to talk with us today.
Well, my delight and pleasure, because like I said, I love talking to you. That ain't even right. It's not even a real interview. It's just hanging out.
No, it doesn't. It never feels like that. I mean, honestly, if someone could record our regular conversations, it would be just like this.
Right? Oh.
Thank you. Okay, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. This is for real. You got several readings. Oh my gosh, no. Just rewind this and listen again. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking this time with me.
Oh, please. My pleasure. Good night, everyone.